I'm Dr David McMenemy, and I'm a member of the Faculty Information Studies subject at the University of Glasgow. Well, I've been writing about ethics and values in librarianship for quite a long time, and I realised one of the issues around ethics and values was it was one of the core aspects of the argument for libraries, but I didn't really see it being used a lot in terms of our advocacy. So for me, it was about trying to empower the library community to engage with those ideas more meaningfully, to allow them to be part of their advocacy more fully. So that was ultimately the main catalyst. And I also realised that a lot of people in the profession don't have access to that material. So if you go to library school, you might study it, but even then, not everyone does. So really it was about trying to make as much of that material available to people as freely as possible. So that's the benefit of having it on a Creative Commons license. It means everyone can use it and hopefully benefit from that being available free. Well, it's broken into several sections. So the first section really deals about what advocacy is and also discusses the tools of rhetoric in terms of how that's applied to making arguments. So the idea being that essentially there's a kind of way of building arguments in terms of classical rhetoric techniques. So things like using what they call logos, which is the logic of the argument, pathos, which is trying to tap into people's emotions and actually kind of make something meaningful for them. And also ethos, which is essentially the bona fides or the strength of the speaker in terms of their background and their knowledge. So all three of those things are really important when it comes to advocacy. And so the first section talks about that. And also a fourth category, which is kairos, which is the specific moment of the argument, making sure you make your arguments at the right time in the right way. So it unpacks that in the first section. The next section moves on to talk about ethical values more generally. So what we look at in that is really the different types of political philosophies that apply within societies so that we can understand the ethical frame of the politician or political party that you're dealing with and be able to articulate your arguments in the way that they understand them. And that then moves on to talk about specifically how those ethical values are applied in librarianship. So the first part of that talks about key thinkers in libraries. So Ranganathan, Michael Gorman, R. David Lankes, as well as D.G. Foskett. So it unpacks some of the writers that really tried to kind of put forward a philosophy of librarianship. And then after that, we talk about specific aspects of ethical values. So things like freedom of expression, privacy, how we organise knowledge, just the kind of key aspects of ethical values that you would say that apply in libraries across the board and are actually important human rights that we uphold in the services that we run. So that's pretty much how it's laid out. The last section brings together everything to try and give some examples of how you can use the tools of rhetoric and understanding of ethical values to argue for specific aspects of libraries. So I use a couple of examples. The first one would be how you would pitch arguments for libraries around things like rights, how you'd pitch them around things like virtue ethics, as well as utilitarianism. And the final section deals with controversial issues in libraries. So it uses a tool called the scale of resistance, which allows you to consider how a potentially controversial initiative or programme could be thought of in advance in terms of the types of objections you might get, so that you're able to better respond to any objections when they come in. But it also allows you to think about how you will engage with different audiences in a meaningful way. So rather than seeing things as arguments and conflict, trying to engage with people who might have an issue with what you're doing, but try to convince them of the worth of it in terms of the service and also the community. I think it's massively important. A lot of what we do really does is a bulwark for human rights in many areas. So obviously things like freedom of expression, freedom of access to information, these are fundamental human rights, but they come with challenges because obviously there's content out there to offend anybody, and we need to acknowledge that, be honest about it, and realise that it means actually having to make arguments for material sometimes, as well as perhaps restricting in some cases if we feel the material isn't appropriate for the audience. But you need to be able to do that in an ethical way. So just kind of closing arguments down when people object. I mean, there are many occasions when people might have a censorship challenge and object to library materials on a reasonable basis. For instance, a book might have been bought for children that's inappropriate for that age group. You have to be honest about those clashes sometimes. So ultimately, the understanding of ethical values is crucial to be able to have these arguments in a meaningful way. I think one of the reasons I wanted to do the project was often you see advocacy that's done in a very lightweight way and it looks unserious. And I think these are very serious issues, and they always have been, but obviously with the arrival of the so-called culture wars, it becomes newsworthy. So a library, being accused of banning a book becomes a news story in the newspapers. So we need to be able to stand behind our decisions in a robust way, and that means a way that's based on our ethical framework, as well as ethical values that overarch that ethical framework as well. Sure, that's a great question. Again, one of the issues I've over the years that I've observed is advocacy being conflated a lot with marketing. So there's often people confuse the two things, and they're very, very different. They have similar background because obviously they're both about trying to make people aware of something, but advocacy is about persuading. So it's not about, basically you must use this product because it's the best thing in the world. It's actually about convincing someone of an argument for something. So from a professional standpoint, advocacy is about convincing people in society about the value of libraries, not necessarily librarians, but libraries and the impact they have on society. And that's a very different exercise from telling someone about an event you're running or a new book that you have in stock that people might be interested in. It's a much bigger concept, as I said earlier, that is underpinned by human rights. So what we do actually, empowers people in society, it empowers communities, and we need to kind of start to think about those arguments in that way because they are important, fundamental things for society. But often I think, advocate in a way that's very lightweight and unserious. So for me, advocacy is about persuading. Certainly in libraries, it's about persuading people about the value of libraries and why they matter and what positive impact they have on wider society. Well, it'd be great to see people debating it. And that obviously, the tools that we've produced for this project are certainly my version of it. And it's absolutely fine if people disagree with it. If it starts even a debate about my approach to it, I would be delighted with that. But ultimately, it would be great if people who work in libraries and haven't had the chance to perhaps attend formal courses are able to understand CILIPS ethical framework better because they've read the materials. So they get that rather than just a set of, just an infographic or a set of 7 themes, what actually underlies those themes. And the guidance that CILIPS provided in the framework is very good, but even beyond that, I think it's really important to read about what these things actually mean, how they've been arrived at over the years, what they mean across wider society, because one of the issues I think that librarians suffer from is just seeing their service in a silo, and a lot of these ethical frameworks that are applied over the top of services are universal, so that they're applied across all services. So it's important to understand the arguments made for and against libraries using those ethical frames. So if it helps people understand that, then I'll be absolutely delighted. It'll be certainly worth the effort. But ultimately, even if it's just about making people debate these issues more, whether it's on social media, at conferences, within journals, then again, I'd be delighted with that. Just open up a dialogue about these issues. I would certainly strongly encourage people within the profession to apply for research funding, like CILIPS Research Fund and also CILIPS Research Funds, because as much as it takes time to think about what you want to do with it, it can actually give you time and space to really think deeply about some of the things in practice that you might be concerned about. And I also think it's a responsibility collectively to contribute to the body of knowledge. I often think back to the scholar librarians of the past who really were librarians but also researchers and really thought deeply about what they did in terms of their practice. And that's a lost art, I think, within practice, and it'd be great to kind of get that back. And I think things like CILIPS Research Fund hopefully encourage that kind of reflection and ensuring that it's put back into the profession, that it becomes part of the ecosystem. So I would encourage people to apply. If you've got an idea, apply, and really try to kind of make something out of it in terms of research and papers or outputs of some kind, but really feed back into the system that really is the one that we all live in. Well, yeah, I mean, I think the toolkit hopefully will be used widely. If anyone's interested in me running a workshop for them, I'd be delighted to do that gratis. Just let me know, because I really want the material to be used. So if there's any library services or special interest groups from CILIP that want to be given a session on how I see it working and even engage with me on it from a critical perspective, I'd be delighted to do that. So just obviously give me a bit of notice, but get in touch and I'd be delighted to do that for you.